Welcome to dojo.live, the place where top minds in travel and hospitality check in to share insights and breakthroughs shaping the industry. Brought to you by Encora, your trusted partner for AI, cloud, and data-driven innovation. Enjoy your stay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live this Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. Here on Dojo Live is where we have candid conversations with industry leaders who are tackling the biggest challenges in travel and hospitality. I am your host, Kim Lantis, and today we're diving into episode number 5 of our Powering Hospitality Insights from Hospitality's PMS Leaders series. Now, today, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be discussing how holiday parks, or campgrounds as we know them in North America, and hotels can learn from each other's operational strategies to boost efficiency, guest satisfaction, and revenue performance. Leading us with his insights on the topic is Siggi Schrot, VP of Sales EMEA at RMS. Siggi, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Kim.
Hi. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge. It's going to be really, really fun today. As we get started, I would love to know a bit more about your journey. If you could share a bit about your background, your role at RMS, and maybe what excites you the most about the future of hospitality technology today.
Sure, I'd love to. And firstly, let me just say how well you pronounce my name. It's very impressive. It's not an easy one to pronounce. So look, I think like a lot of my industry colleagues or people who work in hospitality tech, we have very similar backgrounds, I think. That's what I usually find out. So I grew up in Germany. I lived there until I was 19. And kind of always knew that I wanted to work in hotel operations from an early age in school. I was very intrigued by that world, and in fact then really set out to do that initially. But I had a year spare, in other words, like a gap year as we call it, and I wanted to see the world a little bit, and I really loved the English language back then already. So I decided to go to Ireland. Spend what was supposed to be 1 year in Ireland and then go back to Germany for my apprenticeship. And I really fell in love with Ireland, and I basically cancelled the apprenticeship in Germany and just stayed. And 1 year turned into 2, 3, and then eventually 7 years.
Okay.
So I didn't want to let go of the whole dream of working in hotel operations. So what I did instead was I signed up for a hotel management course in Dublin, did night classes there, and then found a job in rooms division as a night manager in a hotel, and kind of just worked my way around different hotels, varying sizes, star ratings, from night management to day reception, and then finally duty management. So that was kind of the early stages, and this is when I really got hooked by hospitality, really.
And you know a little bit about everything then, Siggi, you've lived it.
Yeah, you look, so I like to think that I've walked in the shoes of my now customers, which can really help, and it never lets go of you really once you're passionate about hospitality, I think. And I have that in common with a lot of my industry peers, and we have a lot of stories around it. So then, eventually I sort of realized that I kind of prefer maybe less antisocial hours, but also it was a bit hard to work my way up in the Irish hotel industry unless your uncle was an owner of a hotel. It was a bit tricky at the time, at least. So I thought the next best thing would be to move into technology because I had a keen interest in it. I thought if I go into technology that looks after the hospitality, I still stay close to hospitality, and I still I can have that passion, and I can sort of accompany the journey hospitality. And that's what I did. I found a really good PMS provider. I was an installer and trainer initially, and then for 18 years I did PMS installations, support, training, customer success, and then eventually came to what I like to call is the dark side of sales, or fast sales. And that's what I've been doing now for 5 years. So that's where
I love it. You have worked extensively with properties optimizing PMS solutions, clearly. Wondering what trends or shifts in the industry prompted today's conversation, because hotels and holiday parks or campgrounds, at least in my experience, don't always get compared yet here we are. Why does this topic matter now? I mean, this is quite
Yeah.
unique, Kieran.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, it was not necessarily unique, but it's relatively new to me. I'm only at RMS for 2 months now, so I'm sort of delving into the world of holiday parks is also very exciting for me because it's relatively new. Now, I have looked after vacation rentals and service departments previously in other jobs, but again, the holiday parks or campgrounds, as you call them, are relatively unique, and they have their own thing going on. But what I've really realized in the last couple of months at RMS, and I learned that every day more and more, is that actually the technological needs between a hotel and a holiday park, they're not so different. Maybe they used to be a lot more different, but I don't think they are any longer. And I think rather than them moving apart, they're moving closer together. Um, you have a lot of hybrid businesses now that have a mix of hotel accommodation, self-catering accommodation in the same business as well. So they have to figure out what one and the other, how one and the other work, and what the challenges are on either side. But I think from a needs perspective, there are not huge amount of differences. There are some operational differences that we need to address, but they are relatively similar. I think the shift, or the sort of coming closer together, is very much determined by the guest expectations and how they've changed. But also, generationally, I think the younger generations, they utilize hospitality and hospitality accommodation differently from maybe my generation and my parents' generation. But also with the big events like COVID, for example, I think things have shifted. So now somebody who maybe used to stay in a hotel is very happy in a holiday park, providing they can get to a certain level of mod cons, let's say, but also vice versa. People who are more maybe campers or vacation rental people, they're really excited by the sort of full service aspects of a hotel. So I think they are moving very much closer together, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I imagine I was going to say, like with COVID, I can see why that would be a shift and just looking for the idea of staying closer to home, but and away from people, and like let's get nostalgic and go back to what we did as kids. I remember growing up in the 80s, camping was a big thing that we did, and then it's not actually something I've done with my children, but
Hmm.
I think I want
No.
to. But I live
Look,
in the
I
middle of
think,
the Sonoran Desert, and it's not exactly ideal camping
well, probably not. And
environment.
so my camping memory was wild camping in a wee tent in a little tent, and there was certainly no mod cons, and that you would wash yourself in a river or whatever. So that was my memory of when I was growing up.
Ditto,
My
ditto.
family never spent the money to go to a nice campsite. I mean, that wasn't
I got my
really.
feet stuck in a mud bog more than once.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
was that
I
was my
was
entertainment.
and it was super fun. It was super fun. You know why I think,
Super fun.
to your second question, why does the topic matter now? I really, again, I don't think that it's suddenly become relevant. I think it's always been there. It's just that maybe traditionally holiday parks have been a little bit neglected when it comes to technology or technology conversations, as if to say they don't need it, they won't know how to use it. Why would they need something like this, right? That is so
Yeah.
amped up and so
Yeah.
innovative. But I really think, we're shortchanging them, the holiday parks, and I think it could also have to do with the fact that maybe they haven't demanded a good technology, and it's about
Mhm.
time that they do, because they deserve it. And I think a holiday park deserves to earn, to run a good business,
Yeah.
and they need that technology to support them.
You mentioned the tech ecosystem or the needs not being that different between a hotel and a holiday park,
Hmm.
but I am curious about some of the common maybe challenges or even the differences, right? Like how
Hmm.
is one managing reservations or inventory or guest experience one way and another the other way, or even
Mm.
that vice versa from the challenges, what can they learn from each other?
Absolutely. And, just don't get me wrong, there are differences. I just think that sometimes we make too much of a big deal of what those are rather than what they have in common, which is nicer conversation. But anyway, I think the differences are, for example, with the holiday park, is that the inventory is constantly changing. Not in all of them, but in a lot of them. And one of the reasons is that it's multi-owner, right? So an owner sells a caravan, then another owner buys a caravan. The holiday park might have a big ground, so when they have a lot of demand, they might add more pitches, they might add more caravans into their stock. So that inventory, and therefore the availability related to it, changes all the time. So I think from a technology perspective, that's a little bit of a mind meld, that's difficult, sort of to be on top of. So you do need not just the PMS to be able to cope with that, but also the people who service the PMS, because there's constant changes that have to be made in the configuration, has to be quite dynamic. So I think the sort of changing of the stock is one major difference between a holiday park and a hotel, where you have 100 rooms, you have 100 rooms. That doesn't change between Monday and Thursday, right? You might add a room because the broom cupboard is turned into one or something at some point to get more revenue. Yeah, it's happened. I've seen that happen.
Harry
Just
Potter-esque,
FYI.
but okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of the main difference, I would say. The other thing I think is this sort of multi-owner aspect of it. Of course, for a holiday park that has many different owners, they engage with the park on a certain level as well as guests. So not only do you have guests staying in owners' caravans, but also owners staying in their own caravans. A guest pays the rate, the owner doesn't pay, the system has to recognize that. The owner might make their own reservations. They may have an owner's portal in which they do that. And maybe we even look after the accounting for the owner. So they might not do that externally. They might expect us to, as a property manager, to actually manage all of their accounts in our system as well. So there's a lot of that extra functionality in the way that you sort of manage reservations and billing, etc. is different from a standard hotel, let's say.
Interesting, super interesting. What are the operational strategies or best practices then that one sector has been maybe slow to adapt? Then how can they help each other? Is there overlap? How would you encourage these brothers and
Yeah.
sisters within the
So,
industry?
so they can definitely learn from each other. So one thing that I had sort of thought about recently as well, because we stayed at a holiday park as part of work, which was very interesting and very nice, but how highly efficient the housekeeping and maintenance operations have to be in a holiday park. If you think about the fact that there might have 118 caravans spread across a really vast area, some by the beach, some in the forest area, etc. Now, a housekeeper would be driving around in a little buggy with all of their equipment, right? Same for the maintenance person, and everything has to be super fast, well timed, and very efficient, right? So I think from a housekeeping and maintenance operations or property management operations perspective, they really have it down, and they have to have it down to a T. So that's maybe something that some hotels that I've stayed in, not all of them, could learn a little bit from, where it's not that difficult to have a clean kettle in the room. It really isn't, have the right staff, the efficiency, the right systems in place, you're good to go. Another thing is that holiday parks are really good at keeping customers on site. So imagine you check into a holiday park, you drive through the gate, and you're there for 2 weeks, and you never leave that park, right? So what does that need? That needs really good on-site entertainment. It needs to be age appropriate, so the kids have to be able to go over there, the adults over there, the granny over there, and they all have to have a bit of entertainment to keep them, happy in the park. And the other thing that I noticed as well, that F&B
But that's a huge opportunity
Mm.
too. Like, yesterday's conversation, we've had this conversation a couple times on Dojo Live, and things similar, was about not focusing on RevPAR, but now Rev Peg or Pog, I can't remember the
Right.
but per available guest, right? Peg,
Yes.
Pog, use the accent you want to use. But I mean, I think that ties in, because if they're staying on site, it opens up all these opportunities of how we can.
100%. I mean, there are
they're
there are grocery shops involved. There is, you might even have a little mall. You have a games arcade. I mean, that's very much what happens in a holiday park, and all of that is revenue, additional revenue. So to design that in a good way means that you're keeping these people spending their money within the park rather than going down to the town to get their entertainment or F&B, right? So on the F&B side, that's really important as well. You have to have child-friendly menus. You've got a burger joint, and over there maybe a classy restaurant, so that there's something for everybody in it. So that's, I think, there are a couple of things that hotels very much can learn from holiday parks. Now, on the flip side, what's very noticeable, sadly still, and which everybody has to pay attention to, is the lack of emphasis on online presence and distribution in holiday parks, right? So how many times, I don't know how often you've done it, but when you go to a website for holiday park, oftentimes they're very outdated, they're very clunky, they don't have great content, it doesn't show off the park in the best light. Their booking engines could be clunky or not work at all, or maybe they don't have a booking engine at all, full stop. So they're losing all of that direct business, and they're giving all the money to the OTAs, and they rely so much on OTAs and on repeat guests, and they just lose a lot of revenue in the process. So the online presence and distribution is a big deal, I think, and they do need to learn, not just from hotels, but in general. I think there needs to be more education around it, I think.
All right. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today too was the guest experience. What I know we talked to, I think we alluded to that a little between hotels and holiday parks, but I think more travelers, especially, in campers, RV owners, not just the ones who are utilizing the properties on hand, but bringing their own to set up, temporarily. It's important for them to also be relying on mobile apps, right? I'm thinking
Mm.
of, the nomad and the forever working from home individuals. Is this also something that holiday parks are paying attention to or need to pay attention to in terms of a mobile first solution? What does that look like?
But it's really funny that this question comes up here, because literally a week ago I was at a holiday park, as I mentioned, and there was a presentation, and there was a company that did a mobile application, and it was all the rage, and they were actually already using it or implementing it, and it's very much needed and necessary. I don't know that the adoption is quite there yet, but that includes hotel businesses as well, especially the smaller independent hotels. So I think it's more a general challenge of lack of adoption, maybe. But what I would say is that, personally, I book every stay I book it from my mobile phone. I can't remember the last time I booked something on a laptop or a desktop, to be honest. So I have a real high expectation, or an expectation that I can do that, right? And as soon as I want to stay somewhere and I can't book on my phone easily, I might just decide not to book that and go to the competitor, right? And so that's just such a shame, because it's not so difficult to implement. And I think there's more than one way to go about this as a business. Yes, you could choose a PMS that has that as part of their package. Fair enough. But a lot of them just don't. And there are definitely really good third-party products that actually cover this to a T, and they're very good at it. And all they need is to hook them up to your PMS via the APIs, and you get that sort of full solution end to end. But absolutely, the mobile apps are important, but I think sometimes we're too stuck on downloadable apps. I think optimized web pages are more than half the battle. In some cases, an optimized web page does exactly the same job, or even a better job, than having to download an app to your phone, take up all the memory of
Yeah.
it, then delete it
Yeah.
later, or forget to delete it, and then get frustrated that you have all these apps on your phone. So personally, I think links to mobile optimized pages are usually the way forward.
Good tip. Very good tip. Another thing that's coming to my mind, that I think is increasingly more important in hospitality in general is sustainability. I
Mm.
imagine that that's even more important for the camper persona. How can PMS technology help hotels, holiday parks reduce their environmental footprint in practical ways? Is this something that you're also seeing a focus on?
Mm, absolutely. I mean, I know at our company we have somebody who looks into this, a lot, in terms of how can we make our technology more sustainable, and in turn then help the customers. And I know most PMS providers nowadays, they need to, they pay attention to that. I think in terms of the the camper persona, probably to your point, is maybe a bit more green, and wants, sustainability a bit more than somebody who tends to stay at five-star luxury hotels and flies first class. So there is a different persona there. But I think on the whole, with all the information that's available and all the news around it, start news around it as well, I think we're all very acutely aware of it. So from a PMS perspective, PMSs from old have already solved one part of it, which is the waste of paper, right? Because going to a PMS means you're cutting back or completely eliminating paper trails. Registration cards. Nowadays, a registration card should really be digital, right? There should be a tablet on the front desk. I shouldn't be handed a piece of paper to sign, to then go into a box, to then eventually get incinerated or go into landfill, right? That doesn't make sense. And that hasn't made sense for probably 30 years, as far as I'm concerned, right? I mean, I think I noticed that early on as well in my career. That would be one obvious thing that a PMS already does, and that's all PMS is really. And then it's just a matter of making sure that It enables things like emailing invoices, maybe a guest portal where customers can view their own invoices at their leisure. When I check out of a hotel, 9 times out of 10, I don't need a copy of an invoice because I can see the payment has gone out of my card from my card account. So I can actually already trace that back anyway, and I can see if they charged me an incorrect figure or not. So I don't insist on an invoice. I always say, no, don't worry, don't waste any paper. I usually say literally, don't waste any paper, please, and I move on. But if I had the ability as a business guest to be able to log in via a link to just download a copy after my stay, happy days. Makes it much easier in a PDF format, so I can immediately upload it into my expense solution or whatever. That's kind of the thing that I would be looking for. There's more powerful things that PMSs can do now and that they should be doing. So, for example, as a business, most businesses will have some kind of energy management solution. They may not be utilizing it well, though. So things like automatically turning on and off electricity, the heating system. On a hot day, all the air conditioning units are blasting, and you're wasting all that energy and increasing your costs. Why not have a solution hooked up to your PMS? The solution knows when the customer is checking in, what's the estimated time of arrival, what's the actual time of arrival, what's the estimated time of departure, and actual time of departure. And then according to those milestones, the system locks down, it turns on and off. That extends to TV screens, anything that's digital, even like welcome screens as you walk into the hotel lobby. Why are they on 24/7 when nobody's reading it? So that's the kind of thing that kind of bugs me. You can tell I get a bit excited about these things, but there's some very
Yeah.
obvious things you could do.
Yeah, and there's solutions out there. Another one I think is just the mobile entry and not having
Right.
to deal with pieces of plastic and
No.
but I think all of this technology is awesome too, but I'm wondering, is the accessibility of it in a place like a mobile park or a holiday park campground, is reliable internet a problem that they're still facing?
I mean, it's really funny because the park I was at had like excellent 5G when I was walking around the park, and then next I'm in a central London hotel and I get nothing. Right? So honestly, I don't think it's any more much to do with the country, the location, which walls you're in or not. I think it is possible to, if you invest correctly, you can get good internet almost everywhere. Now, of course, you are a bit restricted in some very remote locations. So I think that is definitely something that might well be still a concern. But I just wanted to just say one more thing on the sustainability, and that's to me the most important thing, because if I may, so I really love the idea of eco-friendly initiatives that hotels or holiday parks run, and they come with maybe some benefits for the customer because you need to sort of bring them on board to actually carry out those actions, right, or non-actions, as it were. So, for example, I've been to a hotel recently that on check-in said, if you don't need daily housekeeping, you'll get bonus points, or you might get a discount. You might get a free breakfast out of it, or just the little signs you see dotted around. Hang up your towel. That means we don't need to change it. If you want it changing, throw it on the ground or put it in the bathtub. Things like that, I think, are super meaningful. And even just offering that they'll plant a tree on your behalf. How wonderful is that, right? And I would always say, okay, I don't need housekeeping. Why? If I'm there for 2 or 3 nights,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I participate in those when I can. And I mean, you think about it on the operational side, it makes, in theory, the operation easier too, because you're washing
Right.
less, you're doing less, and it's a matter of encouraging that, and then having the material or the tools to help coordinate
Right.
that. Because maybe some
Exactly.
ways it's just easier to just let's just do it all.
Yeah,
It
the
is
template.
easier than having to
Exactly.
know.
Right, right. But
Yeah,
again, the system will tell you when a customer's opted in or opted out of something. So so there's no excuse as
beautiful.
far as I'm
No
concerned.
excuse.
Yeah.
Beautiful. The final few minutes of the show, we're going to move on
Mhm.
to the big three. We've got about 5-10 minutes to get through this. So
Yeah.
we'll see how far we can get. But we're
Uh-huh.
talking, what are the big three? Cloud, data, AI. AI and automation are transforming hospitality. I'm curious as to where you're seeing the biggest impact across hotels, holiday
Mhm.
parks, and what is part of that human expertise still remains in place,
Mhm.
irreplaceable.
So I think one of the most prominent things you see around is sort of AI-driven communication, right? So I think very much so there's a lot of AI already available now and used in a lot of properties that handle not all necessarily, but parts of the communication that a human would normally handle. It's something like responding to a request for a table reservation in the restaurant,
Mhm.
something for like, I want to cancel my booking, I want to extend my booking. All of that could be done via a chat bot, for example, and the bot would then integrate with the PMS and actually action those changes in the PMS. Very straightforward. So that's very exciting, and I think that's already kind of being leveraged. And I think that's sort of that's just the beginnings, really, to be
Mhm.
honest. The other thing is content. How cool is it if you have a system that will compose your responses to feedback that somebody has left on TripAdvisor pages or Google, and then all you have to do is sort of curate it, personalize it a wee bit, and then publish it. That takes a lot of work off your plate. And I speak from experience, having worked in hotels in the early days. It was a very arduous process to sort of manually respond, to come up with a different response for every one of them, because it shouldn't look like a template. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's another really cool use of AI already in the here and now, and that's just going to get better, I think.
Perfect. An important part of the AI is the data piece and the PMS data being very powerful. I still
Mhm.
understand powerful but underutilized. How are you seeing, or how do you think operators can better leverage data to
Mhm.
enhance, this whole idea that we're talking about: efficiency, guest satisfaction, revenue performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first hotel I worked in was 26 years ago in hotel reception, I think. And we used a PMS, and it had a ton of data then already. We took a ton of data. We made the effort to put it in, to collect it, to put it in, and then nobody ever did anything with it, right? And sadly, and some hotels still don't, even now, 25 years later. Imagine, right? We haven't really progressed with the thing. Again, it's around education and actually knowing, what does my PMS, what kind of data does it hold? What can it hold? What kind of fields can I add? Then inserting the data, making sure it's kept clean, and to educate the team that upper and lower cases matter, right? You go back to school when you were taught how to write with an upper and lower case. So things like that, right? And then once you have that and you have an acknowledgement of the data that's there, then is how to leverage it, right? So I think what I would always suggest is look at what data is there, and then see how I can use that going further down the line, pre-stay, during stay, post-stay, bringing people back, repeat guests. And I think one of the big things is having a very good CRM tool that's designed for hospitality, which integrates with the PMS, a two-way connection. Grab the data, it can then crunch it, analyze, do whatever it needs to do, send the email campaign, send the pre-arrival communication, post-departure feedback request, but then also pushes feedback back into the PMS as guest remarks and so forth. So all that is it's at everybody's disposal already. It's just educating people about what's possible. And I think what PMS vendors really have to do is show their potential customers, their marketplace, the integration partners,
Mhm.
introduce them to the partners, because it's not just the PMS. Let's not get so fixed on that, because there are other systems that need to plug in that to make it very holistic, right?
Yeah, I think that's really fun. And you made me think automatically when I'm thinking of holiday parks and just going back to keeping guests on site and all the kinds of activities that could happen. Coming up soon will be the Easter holidays, and I'm thinking
Mm.
egg hunts and things that these
Right.
places can take advantage of the nature, and then making sure that they're campaigning those guests that came with children, right? Because I
Absolutely.
mean, the romantic getaway for the Easter egg hunt is probably not what's going to resonate most, but bring
Yeah,
your
I
kids
mean,
back.
adults like to play dress up sometimes, in fairness. So there you go.
I love it. And I think the last of those big three is the cloud adoption piece, which of course is growing and growing more and more. Some
Mm.
properties are still a bit hesitant. I think, given, at least in my mind, given the more remote nature of a holiday park, I imagine that cloud-based PMS is going to be, there's significant advantages, right?
Right.
Maybe. But what are the barriers? What's the tipping point for these businesses, and not just holiday parks, I think hotels too, but
Mm.
are we
I
going
mean,
toward full cloud adoption?
yeah, we are. I don't think it can be stopped anymore, to be honest. I think, on premise is definitely like a dinosaur, a dying breed, but it's definitely true that there's a lot of people who are still worried about it. The whole process of moving to cloud is in full swing, but there are very many properties still that are stuck in the old ways, or they're so nervous about making the move, right? One thing you mentioned already, that of course, if there is an issue with the
Yeah.
internet reliability, that is going to cause a problem. But I think 9 times out of 10, that can be overcome by having the right routers, the right vendor in place, putting the right cables in place, etc. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at first. But then also, a lot of properties on premise think that it's less secure to move to cloud in terms of data security. And that's a real misconception here, because if you look at scientific evidence and white papers and whatever, it's the other way around, right? So cloud hosted systems are more secure because generally they're maintained, the environments are updated by real experts, right? Whereas if you're running on-premise software, you might have an IT manager who actually was just promoted from a reservation manager role, maybe, or you might have outsourced your IT. And is there much reliability there? Are they always on call? Can they make sure that the data is protected? But it's also much more expensive to run an on-premise, right? Because you have to maintain the servers, the networks. And finally, most of our PMS integration partners are cloud-based systems nowadays. So a cloud-based system will always talk on a deeper level and more creatively with another cloud-based system. Whereas if you still have an old PMS on-premise and then a cloud-based third-party system, you're never going to get the best out of the integration either.
Right. Very good points. Final question for you, Siggi. Looking ahead, what's next, right? With what emerging technologies or innovations do you believe are going to redefine the future of PMS, and what should both hotels and holiday parks, all facets of hospitality businesses be preparing for right now?
Mm-hmm. So one thing we mentioned, AI. It's on everybody's mind, and I'm kind of almost a little tired of the word. Let's find a different word for it. But so I think AI is just going to continue to take more and more pieces of the equation. So I'm thinking of operational decision making. So somebody who would click here, here, and here to do X, Y, Z on the system, AI could just do that on your behalf based on certain triggers, for example. So this operational part to AI is definitely something. And then things like pricing automation, guest communication automation, that's still going to grow further and further. So that's sort of the AI piece. I'm sure there's a lot of clever things that people are already thinking about now. Whether that's going to be a good idea or not, it remains to be seen. I think we'll have to just wait and see. But then the other thing is that personalization, it's all about personalization now from a booker's perspective. So the guest expectations have changed. They're really high generally, even for somebody who just books a caravan in a park, let's say, or a pitch for a tent. So that the sort of next generation PMS has to be very deeply integrated with CRM systems, loyalty platforms, so that you can really build a bespoke stay, not just sort of off the shelf, because everybody wants to feel special. They have their own preferences, and so it needs to be quite tailor-made. And then finally, I think mobile and self-service tech, we already mentioned, that's a big deal. And again, options and choices. The youngsters nowadays, they don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to do everything by themselves on their phone, check in, check out, billing, ordering, no interaction with any humans, So that's kind of, what I see with my teenage nephews and nieces and all that.
Rather stick their hand in the campfire than pick up a telephone and make a phone call.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of my what's next, my idea of what's next.
I love it. Very good predictions. Well, that is a wrap of today's episode on Dojo Live. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, Siggi, learning from you. A big thank you for sharing all about the lessons learned in hospitality from hotels to holiday parks. Now, before we go, if our audience wants to learn more about RMS's PMS and all of your technologies, or speak with you directly, what's the best way to go about doing that?
So we have contact forms as everybody has on our website. That's probably the best way. You can book discovery calls there. You can also book demos there. And also people have my name, link in with me on LinkedIn, send me a private message. I'll either look after it myself, or I'll put you in touch with the right person in the right country. Since I look after Europe, Middle East, and Africa, just to bear in mind the US viewers of this podcast, I can put them in touch with the right people.
Perfect.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you. Fantastic. Well,
Sure.
we'd also like to thank our sponsor, Ancora, for making these amazing conversations possible. Ancora does partner with leading travel and hospitality companies to accelerate world-class engineering solutions. So check that out as well. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Dojo Live for more insights. You can watch all of our past conversations on our website, and we're also available on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, a few others out there, but those are the main ones. And of course, we've got another show coming up for you on Tuesday, April 3rd. That's going to also be at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific, where we speak with Audrey McGray, Vice President at Maestro PMS. So until then, stay curious, stay innovative, and bye for now. Thank you once
Thanks.
again.